Part 1. The Arrival. The transport shuttle touched down on Varath Prime just as the sun began to set. Hyun stepped out onto the landing pad and took his first breath of alien air. It smelled like pine and something else he couldn't quite name. The forest surrounding the settlement stretched as far as he could see, with trees that looked almost like the ones back on Earth, but were just different enough to remind him he was very far from home. He was here as part of a cultural exchange program. The Talveen had agreed to let a human study their way of life, and Hyun had volunteered. He was a xenobiologist, which meant he studied how alien species lived and raised their young. The Talveen were wolf-like creatures who lived in packs with strict rules about who was in charge and how everyone should behave. A tall Talveen waited near the edge of the landing pad. His fur was dark gray with silver streaks, and his eyes were amber. He stood straight and proud, watching Hyun with an expression that was hard to read. "I am Vorith," the Talveen said. His voice was deep and rough. "Alpha of the Redwood Pack. You will follow me." Hyun picked up his bags and followed. He had studied the Talveen language for months, but hearing it spoken was different from reading it on a screen. Vorith walked quickly through the settlement, and Hyun had to hurry to keep up. Other Talveen watched them pass. Some looked curious, others looked suspicious. None of them looked friendly. The settlement was built among the trees with wooden structures that blended into the forest. Everything was functional and simple. There were no decorations or unnecessary things. The Talveen believed in strength and survival. They didn't waste time on things that didn't help them stay alive. Vorith led Hyun to a small building at the edge of the settlement. "You will stay here," he said. "You may observe the pack, but do not interfere with our ways. We agreed to let you study us, not to let you change us." Hyun nodded. "I understand. Thank you for allowing me to be here." Vorith studied him for a long moment. "Humans confuse us," he said finally. "You are weak, small, soft. Yet you spread across the galaxy like fire through dry grass. We do not understand how a species like yours survives, much less thrives." "We work together," Hyun said. "We help each other." "So do we," Vorith replied. "But we do it through strength and order. The strong lead. The weak follow. This is how it has always been." He turned to leave, then stopped. "You should know something. My mate Celera gave birth to 4 cubs 3 months ago. They are not eating properly. Our healers find nothing wrong with them, but they grow weaker each day. The elders say they are defective. If they cannot learn to follow pack law, they will be left in the forest to let nature decide their fate." Hyun felt something cold settle in his stomach. "How long do they have?" "1 week, Vorith said. Maybe less. The elders come in 10 days to inspect all new cubs. If mine are not eating by then, they will be taken." There was pain in his voice, carefully hidden but still there. "I tell you this because you study how species raise their young. Perhaps you will find it interesting to observe." He left before Hyun could respond. Hyun spent that first night unpacking his equipment and reviewing everything he knew about Talveen child-rearing practices. The more he read, the more concerned he became. Talveen cubs were expected to respond to dominance displays from birth. Food was given only after the cubs showed proper submission. The stronger cubs ate first. The weaker ones ate last or not at all. It was harsh, but the Talveen believed it made strong adults who could survive in a difficult world. The next morning, Hyun began his observations. He watched the pack go about their daily routines. They hunted together with perfect coordination. They settled disputes through brief shows of strength. Everything had a purpose. Everything followed rules that everyone understood. On his 3rd day, Vorith allowed him to observe a feeding time for the cubs. Hyun followed him to a den near the center of the settlement. Inside he found Celera, a sleek female with reddish fur and 4 small cubs. The cubs were beautiful, with soft fur and big eyes, but something was wrong. They pressed themselves against the back wall of the den, trembling. Celera approached them with food. She stood tall and growled softly, a sound that meant submit and receive. It was how Talveen mothers had fed cubs for thousands of years. The cubs whimpered and looked away. Their ears were flat against their heads. They didn't move toward the food. Celera tried again, this time with a sharper growl. One cub, a male, began to shake harder. Another, the smallest female, started crying in high, frightened sounds. "They do this every time," Vorith said quietly. He stood in the doorway, watching his mate try and fail to feed their children. "We have tried everything. Soft growls, strong growls, different kinds of food. They will not respond. Even to their own mother. Hyun watched the scene carefully. He had seen this kind of behavior before, but not in aliens. He had seen it in traumatized animals back on Earth. The cubs weren't refusing food because they were defective. They were refusing food because they were terrified. May I try something? Hyun asked. Vorith looked at him sharply. What would a human know about feeding Talveen cubs? Maybe nothing, Hyun admitted. But they're going to die if nothing changes. What harm could it do to let me try? Silara turned from her cubs. Her eyes were desperate. Let him try, she said to her mate. Vorith was silent for a long moment. Finally, he nodded. You have 1 week. If you cannot make them eat, I will not argue when the elders come. Hyun took a deep breath and entered the den. He moved slowly, keeping his body low. He didn't look directly at the cubs. Instead, he sat down on the floor near the entrance, far from where they huddled together. Hello? He said softly. My name is Hyun. I'm not going to hurt you. The cubs watched him with wide, frightened eyes. Behind him, he could hear other Talveen gathering outside the den, curious about what the strange human was doing. Hyun picked up a piece of the food Silara had brought. It looked like meat, but from an animal he didn't recognize. He held it in his hand and simply sat there, not moving, barely breathing. He didn't make any threatening gestures. He didn't stand tall or make himself look big. He just sat and waited. Minutes passed. Then more minutes. The cubs didn't move. Neither did Hyun. Finally, the smallest cub, the one who had been crying, took a tiny step forward. Then another. Hyun stayed perfectly still. The cub crept closer, her whole body ready to run at any moment. When she was close enough, Hyun slowly, very slowly, placed the food on the ground between them. Then he pulled his hand back. The cub looked at the food, looked at Hyun. Then, quick as lightning, she grabbed the food and ran back to her siblings. And she ate. Outside the den, Hyun heard several Talveen make sounds of surprise. Vorith stepped forward, staring. How did you do that? I didn't scare her, Hyun said simply. Sometimes that's enough. Part 2. The Gentle Method. The next morning, Hyun returned to the den before dawn. He brought food with him and sat in the same spot as before. The 4 cubs watched him from their corner. The smallest one, who had eaten from him the day before, seemed less afraid than her siblings. She tilted her head, studying him. Good morning, Hyun said quietly. I have breakfast if anyone is hungry. He placed 4 pieces of food on the ground and then moved back. He didn't rush. He didn't push. He just waited. The small female came first. She ate quickly, watching Hyun the whole time. When nothing bad happened, one of her brothers crept forward. Then another. Finally, all 4 cubs were eating. Silara stood at the entrance of the den, watching in silence. Her tail was still, which Hyun had learned meant she was thinking hard about something. Over the next few days, Hyun established a routine. He came at the same times. He always sat in the same spot. He spoke softly and moved slowly. The cubs began to relax around him. They started eating regularly when he brought food. They even began to play a little, something they had never done before according to Silara. By the 5th day, the smallest cub would sit next to Hyun while she ate. The largest male, who Hyun learned was named Kesh, would watch him with curious eyes. The 2 middle cubs, Mira and Tanik, started approaching him on their own. But there was a problem. When anyone else tried to feed the cubs, they still refused. Silara tried using Hyun's gentle method, sitting low and speaking softly. The cubs wouldn't come to her. Vorith tried. Other pack members tried. Nothing worked. The cubs would only eat when Hyun was the one giving them food. Word spread through the pack and it caused confusion. More and more Talveen came to watch the human feed the defective cubs. They didn't understand what they were seeing. It went against everything they knew about how cubs should behave. Darrow, Vorith's brother, was particularly upset. He was the lead hunter, a strong male with dark fur and scars from many successful hunts. He stood outside the den one morning and watched Hyun with the cubs. This is wrong, Darrow said loudly. You are making them weak. They should learn to respond to strength, not to this softness. Hyun looked up at him. They are eating and growing stronger. How is that weak? They only eat for you, Darrow growled. What happens when you leave? What happens when they must face the real world? Will they expect every challenge to approach them gently? Will they think predators will speak softly before attacking? They're babies, Hyun said. They need to feel safe before they can learn to be strong. That is not how Talveen cubs work, Darrow insisted. They need discipline. They need to understand the pack order. You are teaching them to depend on gentleness, and gentleness will get them killed. Vorith stepped between them. Enough, the cubs are eating. They are gaining weight. The elders will see healthy cubs when they arrive. That is what matters. The elders will see cubs who do not follow pack law, Darrow said. That is what will matter to them. He was right, and everyone knew it. The elders valued tradition above all else. Cubs who couldn't respond to normal pack hierarchy were considered defective, even if they were healthy in every other way. That afternoon, a female Talveen named Jiwan approached Hyun. She was younger than most of the pack adults, with light brown fur and intelligent eyes. She had been watching Hyun's work with great interest. "Can you teach me your method?" she asked. Hyun smiled. "Of course. Sit with me." Jiwan sat down near Hyun. She copied his posture, keeping her body low and relaxed. She softened her voice when she spoke to the cubs. She moved slowly and carefully, just as Hyun did. But when she offered food to the cubs, they backed away. They wouldn't come near her. "I don't understand," Jiwan said, frustrated. "I am doing exactly what you do. Why does it work for you but not for me?" Hyun thought about this for a long time. "I think it's not just about what I do. It's about what I am." "What do you mean?" "Humans are different from Talveen," Hyun said slowly, trying to find the right words. "We don't have the same social rules you do. When the cubs look at you, they see a Talveen adult. They expect you to act like a Talveen adult, which means dominance and hierarchy. When they look at me, they see something else, something that doesn't threaten them in the same way. But you are still larger than them, stronger than them. Why do they not fear you?" Hyun watched little Vin, the smallest cub, as she played with a piece of cloth he had given her. "Maybe because I know what it's like to be afraid." He told Jiwan about his childhood, about growing up in a home where his father used anger and violence to control the family, about learning to hide, to stay quiet, to be small and invisible when the shouting started, about how he became a xenobiologist because he wanted to understand how different species built families, hoping to find examples better than what he had known. "I recognized fear in these cubs the moment I saw them," Hyun said. "The way they pressed against the wall, the way they trembled when Solera approached, even though she was trying to help them. I knew that fear. And I knew that what they needed wasn't more dominance. They needed someone to show them that not every large creature wants to hurt them." Jiwan was quiet for a long time. "Talveen cubs are not supposed to feel fear of their own parents." "Maybe these ones do anyway," Hyun said. "Maybe something happened. Maybe they were born different. Maybe it doesn't matter why. What matters is helping them." That evening, Nara came to see Hyun. She was the pack's keeper of histories, an older female with gray fur and sharp eyes. She carried a datapad with her. "I have been researching humans," she said without introduction. "Your species confuses us. You are physically weak compared to most spacefaring races. You have no natural weapons. Your worlds are dangerous death traps that would kill most species. Yet you dominate trade routes, you win wars, you spread everywhere. I wanted to understand how." "Did you find an answer?" Hyun asked. "Perhaps," Nara said. She showed him the datapad. It displayed images of Earth animals, wolves and dogs. "I learned that your species has a strange ability. You bond with other creatures. You make them family even when they are not your species. These wolves became dogs because your ancestors chose to care for them instead of killing them. Is this true?" "Yes," Hyun said. "We domesticated them. We've done it with many animals. The Talveen do not have this word, domesticate. We have hunt, kill, eat, or ignore. We do not have make family from other species." Nara looked at the cubs. "But you do. You look at these cubs and you see something worth protecting even though they are not human." "Yes," Hyun said simply. "This is why they eat for you," Nara said. "You offer them something no Talveen can. Not just food. Not just gentleness. You offer them what your species has offered to many creatures across your world's history. You offer them adoption." Hyun had never thought of it that way, but Nara was right. He had been treating the cubs not like Talveen cubs or even like human children. He had been treating them like scared animals that needed rehabilitation. Like the dogs and cats in shelters back on Earth. Like creatures that needed someone to show them that the world wasn't entirely cruel. "The elders will not understand this," Nara warned. "They will see only cubs who do not follow proper behavior. They will order correction or exile." "What is correction?" Hyun asked, though he wasn't sure he wanted to know the answer. It is a traditional method for cubs who do not respond to normal training, Nara said carefully. The cubs are separated from the pack. They are given no food until they show proper submission responses. Usually it takes only a day or two. Either the cubs learn or they die. It is considered merciful because it is quick. Hyun felt sick. That's not mercy. That's murder. It is survival, Nara said. In the wild, cubs who cannot follow pack dynamics die anyway. The correction simply hastens the inevitable and prevents the pack from wasting resources on defective offspring. These cubs aren't defective, Hyun said firmly. They're just different. The elders will not see a difference, Nara said. She looked at him with something that might have been sympathy. You have 4 more days before they arrive. I suggest you use them wisely. Part 3. The Human Paradox. The cubs had names now. Hyun had learned them from Silara. Kesh was the largest male, bold and curious. Mira was the female with reddish fur like her mother, quick and clever. Tanik was the quieter male, always watching and thinking. And Vin was the smallest, the one who had eaten first. The one who now followed Hyun everywhere he went in the den. With only 4 days left before the elders arrived, Hyun spent every possible moment with the cubs. They were thriving now. They played and wrestled. They were gaining weight. They even started making the chirping sounds that healthy Talveen cubs made. But they still would only eat when Hyun was present. More Talveen came to watch each day. Some seemed interested. Others seemed disturbed. The cubs' strange behavior was becoming a topic of intense discussion throughout the pack. One morning, Darrow brought his own cubs to see. They were older, almost adolescents, and they behaved exactly as Talveen cubs should. They responded to their father's dominance displays immediately. They ate when and where they were told. They showed proper submission and respect. This is how cubs should act, Darrow said, gesturing to his children. Strong, obedient, aware of their place in the pack order. Look at Vorith's cubs. They play like everything is safe. They show no awareness of hierarchy. They follow a human as if he were their parent. What will become of them? Vorith stood nearby, watching his brother with tired eyes. He had barely slept since the cubs were born. They are alive. They are healthy. That is enough for now. It will not be enough for the elders, Darrow said. You know this. Later that day, Nara asked Hyun to come to her dwelling. Inside she had books and datapads everywhere, all containing information about humans and Earth. I have been learning about your history, Nara said. It is disturbing. Disturbing how? Hyun asked. Your species should not have survived, Nara said bluntly. Your world is what we call a death world. Extreme weather, dangerous predators, diseases that kill quickly and spread faster. Most species that evolve on such worlds become very strong or very aggressive to survive. You became neither. You remained physically weak, yet you survived anyway. How? Hyun thought about how to explain. We worked together. We used tools. We shared knowledge. We took care of our sick and injured instead of leaving them to die. We formed communities that were stronger than any individual. Yes, I read this, but it makes no sense from a survival perspective. Caring for the weak takes resources. It should make the group weaker, not stronger. Yet somehow for humans it worked the opposite way. Nara pulled up an image on her datapad. It showed a graph comparing different species' survival rates. Humans were near the top. Your species has a 97% survival rate for offspring that live past the first year, Nara continued. 97%. Do you understand how impossible that is? The Talveen rate is 60%, and we are considered a successful species. Most predator species have rates between 40 and 70%, but humans keep nearly all their young alive. Even the weak ones. Even the sick ones. Even the ones that in any other species would be allowed to die. We don't like losing our children, Hyun said quietly. We try to save all of them. This is the human paradox, Nara said. You protect weakness and somehow this makes you strong. You bond with other species and this makes you more dangerous, not less. You refuse to follow the basic rules of survival that govern every other species, and yet you thrive. It is illogical. It is impossible, but it is true. She looked at him intently. This is what you are doing with these cubs. You are applying human logic to a Talveen problem. You are protecting weakness, and it is working, but only because you are human. No Talveen could do what you do because we do not think the way you think. Maybe you could learn, Hyun suggested. Nara made a sound that might have been laughter. You do not understand. It is not just about learning a technique. It is about changing our entire worldview. For thousands of years, Talveen survival has depended on strength-based hierarchy. The strong lead and protect. The weak follow and obey. This system works. It has kept us alive through countless challenges. What you suggest would require us to abandon everything we know about survival. But these cubs, Hyun protested. They're proof that another way can work. Are they? Nara challenged. They eat only when you feed them. They respond only to you. What happens when you leave? What happens when they must live in a Talveen pack with Talveen rules? Will your gentle method prepare them for that reality? Hyun didn't have a good answer. He had been so focused on keeping the cubs alive that he hadn't thought much about their future. That evening, Vorith came to Hyun's dwelling. The alpha looked older than he had when Hyun first arrived. The stress was wearing on him. Tell me honestly, Vorith said, can my cubs ever be normal? Can they learn to respond to Talveen authority the way they respond to you? Hyun wanted to say yes. He wanted to give Vorith hope. But he had learned that Talveen valued honesty above comfort. I don't know, Hyun said. Maybe with time and patience. But maybe not. Some animals back on Earth are born with different temperaments. Some wolves never feel comfortable with dominance-based training. Some dogs are always nervous no matter how well you treat them. Maybe your cubs are born different. Then they will die, Vorith said flatly. The elders will not accept cubs who cannot follow pack law. And I cannot protect them against the elders' judgment. What if the pack stood with you? Hyun asked. What if other Talveen agreed that these cubs should be allowed to live even if they're different? It would not matter. The elders' authority comes from tradition that is older than any of us. To defy them is to defy everything the Talveen are. Silara appeared in the doorway. Then perhaps we need to become something new. Vorith turned to his mate. What are you saying? I am saying that I will not let my cubs die because they do not fit an old rule, Silara said firmly. I am saying that if the human can keep them alive with his strange methods, then I want to learn those methods. I am saying that maybe the old ways are not the only ways. You cannot mean this, Vorith said. You would defy the elders? I would save my children, Silara replied. Wouldn't you? Hyun saw something pass between the two Talveen. A long moment of silent communication. Finally, Vorith nodded slowly. If we do this, we risk exile, he warned. The whole pack could suffer. I know, Silara said. Jiwon, who had been listening from outside, stepped into view. I would stand with you, she said. I want to understand what the human knows. I want to learn if there are other ways to raise cubs. One by one, other Talveen appeared. Some were young like Jiwon, others were older. Not everyone in the pack, but enough to matter. Enough to show that questions were being asked that had never been asked before. Darrow was among them, and his presence surprised everyone. I do not understand the humans' methods, he said. I do not agree with them. But Vorith is my brother. His cubs are my blood. I will stand with my family even if I think they are wrong. Nara stepped forward as well. I will document what happens, she said. Whether the elders accept these cubs or reject them, the galaxy should know about this. About cubs who were different. About a human who tried to save them. About a pack that had to choose between tradition and family. Vorith looked around at his pack members. You all understand what you're risking? They nodded. Then we stand together, Vorith said. When the elders come, we will show them healthy cubs. We will argue that results matter more than methods. And if they disagree, he paused, we will face that when it happens. That night, Hyun couldn't sleep. He kept thinking about what Nara had said, about the human paradox, about how his species survived by breaking the normal rules of survival. He wondered if maybe that was the point. Maybe humans were successful not despite their strange compassion, but because of it. Maybe caring for the weak wasn't a weakness at all. He thought about the cubs sleeping in their den, about little Vin who trusted him completely, about Kesh who was starting to explore the world with brave curiosity, about Mira and Tanik who were learning to play and live without constant fear. The elders would come in 3 days. Hyun had no idea if anything he had done would be enough to save these cubs, but he knew he had to try, because that's what humans did. They tried to protect the vulnerable, even when it seemed impossible. Especially when it seemed impossible, it was illogical. It was against all rules of efficient survival, but it was human, and somehow across countless worlds and countless challenges that had been enough. Part 4, The Crisis. The elders arrived early. They came 3 days before they were expected, and they brought more officials than anyone had anticipated. 7 elder Talveen, each representing a different region, walked into the settlement with the authority of centuries behind them. At their head was Vorath, the oldest living Talveen, his fur completely white with age. Yun was with the cubs when the warning howl went through the settlement. Vin was curled up against his leg, sleeping. Kesh and Mira were playing a game where they pounced on each other. Tanik was watching Hyun with curious eyes, occasionally making small chirping sounds. Vorath appeared at the den entrance. "They are here." Vorath demands to see the cubs immediately. Hyun's heart sank. The cubs weren't ready. They were healthy and happy when he was around, but they still hadn't learned to respond to other Talveen. There had been no time to prepare them. "Can we have a few hours?" Hyun asked. "Let me try to get them comfortable with the idea of strangers." "No," Vorath said. "Vorath commands and we obey. Bring the cubs to the central meeting ground now." Hyun gently woke Vin. He called the other cubs to him. They came immediately, sensing his worry and responding to it with their own nervousness. Together they walked through the settlement toward the meeting ground. Talveen lined the path, watching in silence. Hyun could feel their tension. Some looked at him with hope. Others looked angry. Everyone knew that what happened in the next hour could change everything. The meeting ground was a circular clearing surrounded by the largest trees. The 7 elders stood in a line, tall and imposing. Vorath stepped forward. He was old but still powerful, his amber eyes sharp and measuring. "These are the cubs," Vorath said. It wasn't a question. His gaze moved over Kesh, Mira, Tanik, and Vin. The cubs pressed close to Hyun, trembling. "Yes, Elder," Vorath said. "They are healthy. They eat well. They are growing properly." "Show me," Vorath commanded. Solara came forward with food. She approached her cubs the way she had been trying for months, with the traditional dominance display that should trigger submission. The cubs backed away from her, whimpering. They looked at Hyun desperately. Vorath's expression didn't change. Again. Solara tried again, this time with a stronger display. The cubs cowered. Little Vin started crying, the same frightened sound she had made that first day. "Enough," Vorath said. He looked at Vorath. "These cubs are defective. They do not respond to proper authority. They show excessive fear. They are unsuitable for pack life. They can eat," Vorath said quickly. "They are not sick. They are just different." "Different is defective," another elder said. "They do not follow pack law. They cannot learn if they cannot respond to hierarchy." "Let me try," Hyun said, stepping forward. The elders looked at him. Several made sounds of disgust. "A human," one said. "This is your doing, Vorath. You allowed this outsider to corrupt your cubs." "He saved their lives," Solara said fiercely. "He ruined them," Vorath corrected. "Watch." Hyun knelt down and held out food. The cubs came to him immediately. They ate from his hands, calm and trusting. Vin licked his fingers after she finished. Kesh nuzzled against his shoulder. It was a clear display of affection and trust. The elders watched in silence. When the cubs finished eating, Vorath spoke. "This is worse than I thought. These cubs have bonded to an alien. They show pack-bonding behavior toward a creature that is not Talveen. This is corruption at the deepest level. They cannot be corrected. They must be removed." "What does removed mean?" Hyun asked, though he already knew the answer. "They will be taken into the forest and left," Vorath said calmly. "Nature will decide their fate. If they can survive without the humans' interference, they may live. If not, they will die. Either way, they will not contaminate other cubs with their defective behavior." "That's murder," Hyun said. "That is mercy," Vorath replied. "Would you prefer we keep them alive in this corrupted state? Unable to function in pack society? Forever dependent on alien intervention? That would be the cruelty. Death is a kindness compared to a life of dysfunction. They function fine," Hyun argued. "They eat, they play. They learn. Just because they do it differently doesn't mean they're broken. They cannot live in a Talveen pack," Vorath said. "Therefore they are broken. This is not debatable. Guards, take the cubs." Several large Talveen moved forward. The cubs saw them coming and panicked. They tried to hide behind Hyun. Vin was shaking so hard she could barely stand. "Wait," Vorath said, his voice hard. "I invoke the right of challenge." The elders went still. Even Vorath looked surprised. "You would challenge us?" "On what grounds?" "On the grounds of worth," Vorath said. I claim that these cubs have value that is not being recognized. I claim the right to prove their worth through trial. Vorath was quiet for a long moment. The right of challenge is ancient law. I cannot deny it. But know this, Vorath. If you fail, you will be exiled along with your cubs. Your entire family will be outcast. I understand, Vorath said. Actually, Hyun interrupted, I would like to make the challenge myself. Everyone turned to look at him. Vorath started to protest, but Hyun continued. This is my doing, according to you. I'm the one who supposedly corrupted the cubs. So let me prove that my methods work. Let me take the cubs into the wilderness. If we survive for 10 days, you agree that they have value, that they can live. And if you fail, Vorath asked, then you can do whatever you want, Hyun said. But you have to let me try. Vorath studied him. A human and 4 young cubs against the wilderness of Vareth Prime, you will die. Possibly within the first few days. Maybe, Hyun said. But maybe not. That's the point of a trial, isn't it? To see what happens? This is foolish, Darrow said. The human doesn't know our forests. The cubs are untrained. They will all die, and we will have lost Vorath's entire line. They will die anyway if you take them now, Hyun pointed out. Vorath considered for a long time. Finally, he nodded. I accept your challenge. You and the cubs will be taken to the deep forest. You will have no pack support, no supplies except what you can carry. You must survive for 10 days and return here. If you succeed, I will acknowledge that your methods have produced capable cubs. If you fail to return, we will assume you died, and the matter will be closed. Agreed, Hyun said, before anyone could argue. This is madness, Vorath said quietly to Hyun. You have never been in our wilderness. You don't know the dangers. I know enough, Hyun said. I've studied your world's ecology. I've done survival training on 3 different planets. I can do this. The cubs will die if they stay here, Hyun said. At least this way they have a chance. That night, Hyun prepared for the journey. Nara brought him maps and information about the forest. Jiwon brought supplies. Silara came to the den and sat with her cubs for hours, grooming them and making soft sounds Hyun couldn't interpret. When dawn came, the entire pack gathered to watch them leave. Hyun had a pack with basic supplies. The cubs stayed close to him, sensing that something important was happening. Vorath gestured to the forest. Go! We will count 10 days from sunrise. Return by the 10th sunset or do not return at all. Hyun looked down at the 4 cubs. They looked back at him with trusting eyes. Little Vin chirped at him, asking in her own way if everything was okay. We're going on an adventure, Hyun told them, trying to sound confident. Stay close to me. Do what I say. We'll be fine. He didn't know if that was true, but he had to believe it. Because 4 lives depended on him being right. They walked into the forest as the sun rose behind them. Hyun could feel the pack watching until the trees swallowed them up. Then they were alone in the wilderness and the real test began. The first day was about finding shelter. Hyun found a rock formation that created a natural cave. It was small but defensible. He showed the cubs how to make nests from leaves and soft moss. They worked together, and by nightfall they had a warm, dry place to sleep. Kesh stayed at the cave entrance watching for danger. Mira helped gather materials. Tanik explored the area and reported back. Vin stayed close to Hyun, her small body pressed against his side. As darkness fell, Hyun heard sounds in the forest. Howls and growls from creatures he couldn't see. The cubs heard them too and pressed closer together. It's okay, Hyun whispered. We're safe here. Sleep now. Tomorrow we'll figure out the next step. But as he lay there in the dark, listening to alien predators calling in the night, Hyun wondered if he had just made a terrible mistake. The second day in the wilderness, Hyun taught the cubs how to find food. He showed them which plants were safe to eat and which ones to avoid. He demonstrated how to find water by following insect trails. The cubs learned quickly, their natural instincts combining with Hyun's guidance in ways that surprised him. Mira discovered a patch of edible roots. Tanik found a stream with small fish. Kesh learned how to dig for grubs under rotting logs. Even little Vin contributed by alerting them to dangers with her sharp hearing. They weren't just surviving. They were learning to work as a team. On the 3rd day, they encountered their first real danger. A large predator, something like a bear but with longer claws and sharper teeth, crossed their path. The cubs froze in fear. Hyun's first instinct was to panic, but he forced himself to stay calm. He remembered what he knew about Earth predators and what he'd learned about Vareth Prime's wildlife. "Make noise," he told the cubs. "Look big. Show it we're not easy prey." Together they made themselves as large and loud as possible. Kesh roared, a sound much deeper than Hyun expected from such a young cub. Mira and Tanik joined in. Hyun banged his walking stick against a tree. The predator paused, reconsidered, and moved away. It wasn't worth the effort to fight 5 creatures that fought back. After the predator left, the cubs gathered around Hyun, chirping excitedly. They had faced danger and won, not through individual strength, but through coordination and noise and the decision to stand together. It was a human strategy, and it had worked. The 4th and 5th days were about building routine. They established a pattern: wake at dawn, find water, gather food, move to a new location, make shelter, sleep. The cubs adapted to this rhythm. They stopped looking scared all the time. They started exploring with confidence. Hyun noticed something interesting. Without the pressure of pack hierarchy, the cubs were developing their own personalities more clearly. Kesh became the protector, always watching for threats. Mira became the problem solver, figuring out how to reach high branches or cross streams. Tanik became the scout, ranging ahead to find the best paths. And Vin, despite being smallest, became their emotional center, sensing when others were stressed and offering comfort. They weren't following traditional Talvin roles. They were becoming something new. On the 6th day, they found evidence that they were being followed. Paw prints too regular to be random. Broken branches at consistent intervals. Someone was tracking them. Hyun didn't tell the cubs, but he suspected Vorith and others from the pack were secretly watching, ready to intervene if things went truly wrong. It made him feel better knowing they weren't completely alone, even if he couldn't let on that he knew. The 7th day brought rain. Heavy, cold rain that soaked through everything. Hyun knew this was a critical test. Hypothermia killed faster than hunger or predators. He found an overhang and showed the cubs how to huddle together for warmth. They pressed against him and against each other, sharing body heat. Finn shivered in the middle of the group, and everyone instinctively moved closer to warm her. "This is what family does," Hyun told them as the rain poured down. "We keep each other safe. We share warmth. We survive together." The cubs chirped softly in response, a sound of comfort and agreement. On the 8th day, disaster struck. They encountered a territorial predator that wouldn't back down. It was large, aggressive, and desperate. Hyun realized it was defending a den, which meant it would fight to the death. He had 2 choices: run and possibly lead it back to their shelter, or stand and fight with nothing but a stick and 4 young cubs. He chose to fight, but not in the way a Talvin would. He didn't charge forward or try to establish dominance. Instead, he used tactics. He had Mira and Tanik circle around to the sides, making noise to confuse the predator. He had Kesh stand with him, both of them making themselves look bigger. Vin he told to climb a tree and stay safe. The predator lunged. Hyun dodged and struck with his stick, not trying to hurt it, but to redirect its momentum. Kesh bit at its heels, then darted away before it could retaliate. Mira threw rocks from the side. Tanik howled from behind, making the predator turn and lose focus. They didn't overpower the predator. They annoyed it, confused it, made it work too hard for a meal. After several minutes of this frustrating dance, the predator gave up and retreated to its den. It wasn't worth the energy. The cubs and Hyun collapsed together, panting and exhausted, but they were alive. They had faced a superior opponent and survived through cooperation and strategy. It was the most human thing they could have done. On the 9th day, Hyun taught the cubs how to hunt properly. Not the Talvin way with dominance and pack hierarchy, but the human way. Planning, patience, working together. They tracked a small herbivore, coordinated their approach, and successfully caught their first prey. The cubs ate the meat with pride. They had provided for themselves. More importantly, they had done it as a team, each using their strengths. Kesh had tracked. Mira had strategized. Tanik had circled around. Even Vin had played a role by staying quiet and not alerting the prey. That night, as they settled in their shelter, Hyun looked at the 4 cubs and felt overwhelming pride. They had changed so much in 9 days. They were confident, capable, and bonded to each other in ways that went beyond simple pack hierarchy. They had become a true family. The 10th day was the longest. They had to make the journey back to the settlement. Hyun was exhausted, his body covered in scratches and bruises. The cubs were tired too, but their spirits were high. They had survived. They had proven themselves. As they approached the settlement, Talvin appeared from the forest to escort them. Hyun recognized Vorith, Silara, Darrow, Jiwon, and Nara among them. They had indeed been following, though they had never interfered. "You made it," Vorith said, his voice rough with emotion. "We made it," Hyun confirmed. The entire pack had gathered at the meeting ground. The 7 elders stood in their line with Vorith at the center. The cubs walked beside Hyun, no longer trembling or afraid. They held their heads high, looking around with curious eyes. Vorith studied them for a long moment. "You survived. We did more than survive," Hyun said. "We thrived. These cubs learned to hunt, to work together, to face danger and overcome it. They're not defective. They're different. And that difference makes them stronger, not weaker." "Show me," Vorith said. Hyun looked at the cubs. "Remember what I taught you?" "Show them." Without any command from Hyun, the cubs demonstrated what they had learned. They showed how they could coordinate to solve problems, how they could communicate with each other and with Hyun, how they could face challenges through cooperation rather than dominance. The pack watched in silence. This was not how Talvin cubs behaved, but it was undeniably effective. These cubs had survived 10 days in the wilderness with only a human for guidance. They had faced predators and won. They had learned to hunt and gather. They had done everything a Talvin needed to do to survive, just in a completely different way. When the demonstration ended, Vorith conferred quietly with the other elders. The conversation lasted a long time. Finally, he turned back to Hyun and the cubs. "I do not understand what you have done," Vorith said slowly. "These cubs do not follow pack law. They do not respond to dominance hierarchy. They bond with an alien as if he were their parent. By every traditional measure, they are wrong." Hyun felt his heart sink. They had done everything right, and it still wasn't enough. But Vorith continued. "However, I cannot deny what I have witnessed. These cubs are capable. They are healthy. They survived a trial that would challenge even trained adult Talvin. Whatever the human has done, it has produced results." He looked at Vorith and Silara. "Your cubs will be allowed to live. They will not undergo correction. They will not be exiled, but they will be designated as a separate category. Not defective, but variant. They will be permitted to develop in their own way with the human's continued guidance if he agrees." "I agree," Hyun said immediately. "There is more," Vorith said. "Other Talvin have approached us during your absence. They have cubs who show similar fear responses, cubs who do not thrive under traditional methods. We are authorizing a trial program. These cubs may be raised using the human's gentle methods as an alternative to correction or exile. Jiwon will oversee this program, learning from the human and adapting his techniques for Talvin use." Jiwon stepped forward, her eyes bright with excitement. "I am honored, Elder." "Do not mistake this for approval of human ways," Vorith warned. "This is merely acknowledgement that some cubs require different approaches. The vast majority of Talvin will continue to be raised in the traditional manner, but for the few who are different, there will now be an alternative. This is what you have earned through your trial." It wasn't everything Hyun had hoped for, but it was more than he had expected. It was a beginning. Later that evening, after the formalities were complete, Hyun sat with the 4 cubs in their den. They cuddled around him, content and safe. Vorith and Silara came to visit, and for the first time, the cubs approached their parents without fear. Silara groomed them gently while Vorith watched with quiet pride. "Thank you," Vorith said to Hyun. "You saved them. You saved us." "They saved themselves," Hyun said. "I just showed them a different way to be strong." Over the following months, Hyun remained. 5 years passed. Kashmira, Tanik, and Vin grew into strong adults. They were different from other Talvin, but they were valued members of the pack. Kesh became a scout who could track prey that others missed. Mira became an inventor who created tools to make life easier. Tanik became a teacher who could reach troubled cubs that no one else could help. And Vin, smallest of them all, became a diplomat who could negotiate with other species in ways that aggressive Talvin couldn't. They had learned to bridge 2 worlds. They understood Talvin's strength and human gentleness. They could work within the pack hierarchy when needed, but they also knew how to cooperate outside of it. They were proof that there was more than one way to be strong. Hyun eventually left Verath Prime to continue his research on other worlds, but he returned often. The cubs, now adults, would always greet him with excited chirps and gentle head bumps. They never forgot who had shown them that being different wasn't the same as being broken. The Talveen still valued strength and hierarchy. That didn't change. But now they also had a place for cubs who needed gentleness, for individuals who thrived on cooperation rather than dominance, for those who were variant rather than defective. It was a small change in a vast galaxy, but small changes repeated enough times eventually transform worlds. That was another human paradox. Humans rarely conquered through overwhelming force. They conquered through persistent compassion, through refusing to abandon the vulnerable, through believing that every life had value even when logic said otherwise. The cubs had only eaten when the human provided them. The pack had been confused and couldn't explain it. But in the end, they understood. The cubs weren't waiting for food. They were waiting for safety. They were waiting for someone to show them that strength didn't always have to hurt, that power could protect instead of dominate, that family could be built on trust instead of fear. And the human, who knew what it meant to be small and afraid in a harsh world, had given them exactly that. Not because it was logical or efficient or followed any rules of survival, but because it was the right thing to do. Because compassion, in the end, was the most powerful force in the galaxy, even when it made no sense. Especially when it made no sense. That was the human way, and somehow impossibly it worked.